Welcome back to the ProSeries podcast, episode 178. Today's guest is Rob Murray. He is the CEO and co-founder of Intrigue Media. It's a landscape digital marketing company who is revolutionizing the landscape media game. It is recognized as one of the fastest growing companies in Canada and has helped work with over 1,000 businesses. It's a great episode. Rob gives a lot of media experience. Even if you're not even in the landscape business, it's a great episode to listen to if you're struggling with media. But before we get into this episode, please like, subscribe, and review this podcast on wherever you listen to podcasts. And now I hope you enjoy episode 178 with Rob Murray. Robert, thank you so much for hopping on the podcast. I'm excited to talk to you about your digital marketing background and kind of how you got to where you are. But thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come on the podcast.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, pumped to be here. Appreciate you taking the time to do this with me.
Yeah, I want to get into a really cool topic that you have of the 5 common mistakes in digital marketing and what people do in their business. But I want to start off and how you kind of got into the business and how you started. Maybe go back to high school, or was it something that you fell in love with as you were going through school?
Yeah, I mean, so Paul DeMarco and I, so co-founders, started Intrigue in 2007 while we were in our second year of university at the University of Guelph.
Okay.
And we started off at a completely different business. It was called Digital Out of Home. So we put up a flat screen TV at the university center at our college and sold ads for $50 a month, no contracts, skateboarding on longboards with a backpack on, to local businesses in downtown to try to get kids to come down there before 11 p.m. at night. And then we were just doing it on the side as a hustle to help pay for tuition and beer. And then our first year, our goal was $8,000. We ended up doing 20. Our second year goal was 20. We ended up doing $60,000. And then our third year, we ended up doing 100,000. And we're like, man, we've got something here. Maybe we should really double down. We used Best Buy to help us finance TVs. There was a little credit card kiosk in the store. It said apply for it was Future Shop at the time, right? Now Best Buy. And it was like 90 days, no interest, no payments, if you're approved. So we put our information in. It's like, you're approved for $2,500 credit, 90 days, no interest, no payments. We're like flabbergasted. 2 kids out of school, we had no credit, but whatever. So it gave us essentially 90 days to buy a computer, a TV, cords, and a mount, install it. Gave us 90 days to sell enough ads on it to pay for itself, and then come back and repeat the process. So we did that about 13 times over, which essentially financed the capital to get these TVs up and sell ads to these local businesses. And then we ended up selling a third of the business to an investment firm in a neighboring city, which then capitalized us to bring it into 3 different communities. And then we franchised that business model and brought it to, I want to say, like 10 different cities in Ontario. And then from there, we got dragged into online marketing because all the customers that were working with us kept saying like, hey, when are you going to start building websites? My cousin left. My nephew is, out of school and got a full-time job, can't help me anymore. I don't have my login. My website's garbage. Everybody had a story. When are you going to help us figure out this Facebook thing and how do we get to the top of Google? So our client base from that digital out of home business dragged us into online marketing. And then over the years, we really realized that renewal is the key to growth. If we want to grow our business, we got to keep our customers.
Mm-hmm.
And keeping customers on an out-of-home advertising model is just very difficult to do because it's hard to measure results. So we slowly but surely moved more and more into online marketing because we could, show and demonstrate the results we were bringing for people. We got more and more specific in terms of our niche. So we were working with home improvement, construction entrepreneurs, and now we're really focused on the landscape entrepreneur. So we sold that digital out-of-home business in 2021. And now we're entirely focused on results-oriented digital marketing for lead generation for landscape entrepreneurs in North America.
Wow. That's so interesting how you started just with the TV, like advertisements.
Straight up.
Jeez.
Totally different where we are today.
And was that a thing back then, or are you kind of creating that off of like a creative idea?
Yeah, it was kind of it wasn't a thing, right? There was nobody doing it. And it was kind of how we got into talking to a bunch of businesses because it was on that precipice of print was dying, radio was really expensive for a local business to advertise, billboards were, tough to anyway. So people were looking for an alternative, but they didn't quite understand the internet yet. So it kind of gave us that kind of middle ground. We had no idea what we were doing, trying to figure out how to batch text code to open up files on computers remotely. And we used all the hacks you could to try to figure out how to get a file from one place in the world to another, but we ended up making it work.
That's pretty cool. That is really cool. So did you go to school for marketing?
Tourism and hospitality, actually.
Really? Okay.
Mhm.
And did you already always have that like wanting of marketing? Was that always something that you loved?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, I've always been helping people make money, or I've been selling stuff myself. I started my first business plan in grade 7. It was called Just or Rainbow Computer Games, where we essentially, do you remember freeware?
No.
This is before your time, or yeah, before your time. So 3.25-inch floppy disks.
Okay.
You get these freeware games like Doom and Alley Ball and whatever. So they're like free versions of like maybe 4 levels out of a 20 level game.
Okay.
And there'd be like 50 of them, and you put them on a disc and you could give them away. You weren't allowed to sell them because they're like trials of these like great games. So we made this game called Fortune Teller, and it was essentially a game where you pick a number from 1 to 100. It tells you your fortune. If you pick the same number, it tells you the same fortune. Like there's no randomization whatsoever. But it was a legitimate game that we sold for $7 and included 100 of your favorite freeware games with your $7 purchase. And so that was in grade 7. That was our first business. Then we started a sock business, a t-shirt business. Anyway, yeah. So I've always been trying to figure out how to help people sell stuff.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That is really
Yeah.
cool. So now going into what you're doing now, how did that all get started with your company?
Well, that's exactly what happened. We started with the digital out of home. We moved into websites, and then we started into home improvement and construction, and then got more niched. So in 2021, we really focused in on landscapers.
Okay.
And so now we're traveling all across the US and Canada, going to conferences and speaking to landscape contractors across the continent.
Do you feel it harder to find clients? I mean, I feel there's so many people like in the design world, they're very niche. They'll just do kitchens or they'll just do bathrooms, and they find it harder to find clients because they are so niche. Is it harder for you to find clients
No,
that
it's way
way?
easier.
Way easier.
So
Okay.
yeah, well, I mean, there's a couple of things when it comes to um, niching or positioning in a marketplace. So first of all, niches are in or riches are in the niches, right?
Mhm.
However, when it comes to geography and area of focus, there's a lot of ways to niche: type of work you do, the customer you serve, the business that you're in, like the industry that you're in.
Mhm.
Um, so there's lots of ways to niche. If you focus on, say, just kitchen designs and you niche yourself down to just kitchen designs and you stay local, well, then your viable market becomes pretty small. But if you're just kitchen designs, but you're like the best at some specific type of kitchen that could be across North America, and you happen to be an expert in all the different codes and all the different areas that you work in, well, then your market's gotten a lot bigger. So I think if you're truly niched, then you are an expert in something that very few people are.
Mm.
And then hopefully become the choice, not a choice, when it comes to people looking for the solution that you do.
Yeah. Helps you
I
stand
also,
out.
yeah, I also think people are get nervous to do it because they think the market's going to be too small. So then they become apprehensive to pull the trigger.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So,
That's 100%.
so they stay wide. And if you stay wide, then you're just jack of all trades, master of none type of thing.
Yeah. I felt there's a lot of listeners of the podcast are usually someone that is left their corporate world job or working for a company for years and they're trying to going into their company like their passion project they're finally go full time into. What is your advice on someone that is just diving in, starting their business from scratch? And what would you do first in a digital marketing aspect that like what would they start first? Is it a website, social media? Like,
Well, first things first, read the E Myth Revisited,
okay.
Michael Gerber, E Myth.
Okay. I
Yeah.
need to write that down.
Yeah, that's the first thing I would recommend anybody doing, the thing that you just described.
Okay.
Because then they can understand that there's three parts to their job. There's the doer of the work, the manager of the work, and the entrepreneur. And they got to realize which one they like to be, which one they're not good at, and where they spend least amount of time, and start getting their head wrapped around like all three need to be fed and all three need to be done. Um, and then if you're, it depends. So I find when it comes to marketing and sales, when you're kind of going from zero to say 100,000 a year,
Hmm.
um, I find when you're making no money, you have lots of time because you've got nothing to do, right? You didn't
Yeah.
make a sale, so you've got time on your hands. And so I would encourage folks, especially in this line of work, say design or construction, to get part of their home builders association or chamber of commerce, business of trade, um, and start networking and talking to people about what they're doing and be curious and learn how to network properly. And by networking properly, I mean give value, connect with people, serve others, be curious. Um, the number one rule, like if you want to be interesting, be interested.
I like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, that's
So
something.
get out there, talk to people.
That's something a lot. I think a lot of people, especially like maybe my generation or younger, probably are going to hurt with because they see it as a digital world. We're living in a digital world. Digital marketing is where it's at, but you still have to go out there and network. You need to do that face to face.
Your net worth is your network.
I like these nuggets that you keep inserting
It's
in.
it's the
Yeah,
truth though, right?
yeah,
Like if you think you're gonna build a business for, let's say, kitchen design on the back of a great website and some Google ads, forget about it.
yeah.
Like there are people that have been building homes in your communities for decades, if not a century, and it would be really good if they knew who you were. So,
Exactly.
and
And
they,
yeah, I mean, if we're staying with the construction business, there's a lot of people, like you said, they're been here for centuries. They don't do a lot of digital. So how are they going to ever know who you are?
sure, yeah, it's not saying that, and they're gonna get left behind for sure.
Oh,
Um,
100%. Yeah.
yeah, but it really goes a long way when people know that there's a reputable person behind that website.
Yeah. That actually brings up a good point for those companies that are, not adapting with the times with digital marketing. What do you have to say to them? Obviously, they're going to be left behind. You have to adapt with the times and stuff. But what do you say? Because I mean, I feel like even websites, I feel like more people are looking on people's social medias than websites anymore. Do you feel that way, or is it just kind of my industry?
Well, no, I mean, I don't feel one way or another about the whole thing. The data tells the story. So, let's say, so for example, with landscape purchases, so
Hmm.
someone's looking to buy a landscape renovation project. So looking to hire a landscape contractor. We're talking for like a $200,000, renovation, like a legit, you know, investment. What we see, not what we feel, what we see is that people, if they don't know somebody, right? So first of all, people look for references when they know somebody. Who did your place? Great. Can you introduce me? I'd love they did great work. You love them. My risk goes down. You vetted them. I don't have to find a stranger. Now, assume it's somebody who just moved into a community, they don't know anybody, and they want to renovate their backyard because they just moved into this new place and the backyard's crap. Um, when they Google stuff, because that's where they usually typically go to start, if they're actively looking to purchase, they'll Google stuff. So landscape contractor near me or landscape contracting business or whatever, check out a bunch. And then they'll go look at their social profile and say, like, are they real? Are they timely? Are they around? Was the last post from 2022? Or are they like actively, involved? So we see in the data in terms of buyer journeys, more people are looking at social profiles on big purchases to validate that people are real, that
Okay.
they're around and relevant. We see a lot of times with people that are when they come through the social channel as an inquiry, the value of that inquiry is much lower than it is through a website.
Hmm.
So not to say they don't happen, and not
Yeah.
to say great leads don't come through social channels. We just see more often than not the value of that lead is lower, um, they're not as committed, and it's typically because people don't look when they're buying in social profiles. Like they might go for inspiration to Pinterest and Instagram,
Yeah.
but they're not necessarily looking to hire somebody. Like, who should I hire? And maybe more and more that's going to change over time.
Yeah.
But right now, we're seeing the high value projects come through us.
That makes sense because majority of my industry is using social as a portfolio based thing. So it's again
Yeah, for
going back
sure.
to the verification. Oh, this person can do the work.
Yeah. And I mean, and if somebody knows you, or someone that knows somebody that knows you, sees your stuff on Instagram, they might come reach out to you. I'm not trying to say they won't. Um, so I think it's still valid, like it needs to be said, but the websites still have their place for sure.
Absolutely. So what are the five most common mistakes that you find or you've seen in your expertise?
Yeah, cool. So I mean, first one is that people communicate to the wrong part of the brain. Um,
What do you mean by
so
that?
so a lot of people speak, this is what I do and how I do it differently, or how I do it. So like, for example, we build kitchens. We have a team of experienced craftsmen. We use the best wood and the best tools. We're really good at communicating. Buy our kitchen. Versus starting with why, which is Simon Sinek stuff, which is going after the limbic brain. So what I just did was neurocortex communication. Speaking about like vast amounts of information. It's logical. It's reasonable. It's responsible for vocabulary and um, arithmetic, but it's not responsible for decision making. Our limbic brain is responsible for decision making and emotions. So how do I get you emotionally involved when it comes to working with me? So it's like, at XYZ Kitchens, we believe kitchens are the heart and soul of a home. This is where friendships are built and families are, cry together and laugh together. It's why we build the best kitchens. We do so this way, and hey, we build kitchens. If that heart and soul of a house, if that resonates with somebody, they might be like, yeah, that's where we party, that's where we cry, that's where homework gets done. You can draw on the story about the belief of what the kitchen's meant to be in a home.
Hmm.
That will get somebody emotionally involved. Not everybody. Some people don't care about that. Some people just want a great place to cook.
Yeah.
Different people, different strokes, different folks. But the long and the short of the mistake is that people think that by saying this is what I do and how I do it, you should buy from me, elicits decision making. It doesn't.
Hmm.
People make decisions emotionally, and so we have to figure out how to communicate to them emotionally, which is very difficult to do. But Simon Sinek's Start With Why, the book and the TED Talk, are great examples to get someone thinking properly on how to speak to somebody. Like, yeah, at Intrigue, our purpose is empowering leaders to strengthen communities. We exist to support entrepreneurs, the crazy people that put their homes on the line to grow a business and to hire the people and families of our communities. They're the ones that, fund our soccer teams and our local hospitals. And they're the only people I've ever met that are willing to work 80 hours a week to avoid working 40. And they typically don't get the service they deserve. And so we've designed our entire company to support the entrepreneur.
Absolutely. That's a great way to think about it because a lot of people don't think of their business or they were coming up with their purpose of their business or whatever. And they're just usually just doing it because they love kitchens. They're not really trying to tap into the emotional side of the customer and give them a reason why they should buy from them.
Yeah, and the the person's going to buy for their reasons,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? They're not going to buy for my reasons.
Yeah.
So Simon Sinek does a great job in the Start With Why approach about when you communicate what you believe, you find other people that believe the same thing, and then they buy because they have that belief, not because you do. You just happen to believe the same thing. So now you want to work together because that builds trust and loyalty. So I
I,
would highly recommend the audience to check out Simon Sinek Start With Why if you haven't had a chance already.
I love that. Yeah. And I didn't know there was a TED Talk too, so I'm gonna have to watch that
Yeah,
as well.
there's a 5-minute YouTube and an 18-minute version. The 18-minute version is obviously better, but they're both good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so what else do you have there for common
So
mistakes?
second mistake is that most people think sales growth is dependent on new business,
Mm.
and they forget that they have a revenue model that pretty much every company has, and it can be optimized at every step. We look at it typically, if you simplify the revenue model, there's 6 different levers that you can pull on in order to increase profitability. But essentially the revenue model goes something like this. You have your leads, so people that want to talk to you about working with you, and that can come in many shape or forms, social media, DM, email, form submission, phone call, whatever it might be, walk in, depending if you have a retail store. And then there's a conversion rate on those leads. So how many of them turn into customers? When you have customers, you have your average sale. So what's your average sale worth? Then you have gross margin as a percentage on average. That gives you gross margin dollars. Then you have the number of purchases in a year. So how many times does somebody buy from you in a year? And then how many years does somebody buy from you over the lifetime? And that gives you your average lifetime value of a customer in gross margin dollars. So you take, 10 leads, 30% conversion rate. It's going to give you 3 customers. Average sale is going to be, say, 50 grand. You just go down the list of this, and then you say, okay, well, how do I increase my leads by 10%? How do I increase my conversion rate by 10%? How do I increase my average sale by 10%? How do I increase my average gross margin by 10%? How do I increase my average frequency of purchase by 10%? So if they buy 1, how do I get someone to buy 1.1 times? It means, how do I get 1 out of 10 customers to buy twice? And then if someone lasts for me a year, how do I go to 1.1 years? If they last 5 years, how do I get them to go to 5.5 years? Anyway, there's 6 different levers. If you increase each of those levers by 10%, the overall system increases by 83%. And it's not crazy to increase one of those levers by 10%. Like, how do you increase leads by 10%? Hire a marketing company. Introduce a formal referral program. Wrap your trucks. I mean, there's a number of different ways you can get more lead flow.
Oh yeah.
Conversion rate, formal sales training. Very few people have taken formal sales training. It's bananas. I speak to audiences all over Canada and the US, and it's probably 1 in 200 people have taken formal sales training.
Yeah. It's
It's
insane.
nuts. So anyway, you go through the list. How can I increase this by 10%? You do 1 a quarter for 6 quarters, and you get an 83% increase in revenue without having to touch what you're doing with business.
Yeah. That's funny how you say the sales training. It is true. No one really goes through it. And I went through one right out of college. It was like a behavioral. Have you ever been trained on the disc?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think that is so beneficial. Even I had a non-sales job as a designer for a retail company, and I even had to deal with it. I think it's just common knowledge for you to go through life.
Well, and I mean, sales done properly is about understanding people well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So I would recommend Sandler sales training is the one that I find has it's the most accessible, meaning that
Yeah.
there's coaches everywhere, and it's been really successful for us and people we know that have been through the program. Yeah,
Absolutely.
so it's not just about new customers. There's ways to optimize your revenue models throughout the entire chain of the lifetime of a customer.
Yeah, this is huge. I think a lot of you say this to someone that's starting out a business or, been in years of business and they're they want to do it all themselves, but they don't know exactly how to do it the way you just said it or even think that way and actually take those changes and actually adapt it to their career or their business.
Yeah, and it's tiny stuff. Like, you don't have to move mountains in a day. If you increase your price by 10%, your average sale goes up by 10%. And usually your gross margin goes up at least 5%. Cost might be going up too, but that just increase your price by 10%. You get kind of 1.5 of those 6 levers out of the gate. A lot of people don't increase their price year over year.
Hmm.
Bananas. So anybody listening to this, you haven't increased your price last 12 months. The time is now.
Yeah. Just little things that add up over time.
Big time.
So what's number 3?
People speak about themselves, not their customers. So
Mm.
people have a tendency, if you go to a website, you'll see this on 99.9% of websites that exist, just like the communicating in the wrong part of the brain, they are typically company centric. It's all about us and solution oriented. So what does that sound like? Well, we've been around for 40 years. We have over 200 years experience on the team. We have this geographic service area. We do all these services. These services are this solution, this solution, this solution, this solution. Great. So now I know what you do and where you've come from, whatever. The problem with that is that people don't care. Um, People really only care about two things and two things alone, especially as customers. That is solving their problems and accomplishing their goals. Yet we're sitting here talking about ourselves. And like we said before in networking, if you want to be interesting, you have to be interested. Um, the biggest thing that we see is that people hate to be sold to and they love to buy stuff. So, how do we get away from selling and move towards a buying environment? Well, we know that people will buy from people they trust. Well, how do I get someone to build trust? Can I say, Eric, trust me? I cannot.
No, doesn't hold
The
any weight.
Yeah, it elicits the opposite, right? So how do I go about doing that? Well, I have to demonstrate I'm like you. How do I demonstrate I'm like you? And this is what I mean by that. Have you ever been traveling around the world, met somebody who grew up where you grew up?
Yeah,
Did you build a little bit of rapport and trust with them immediately?
yeah.
Is there any justification to that trust? No.
No, no, not at all.
But because they're like you, we trust. So people like me, I trust people like me. You are my friend when you walk on my moccasins. I can do that by demonstrating with questions. I understand your problems better than you. When it comes to kitchen design, are you going to be hosting? Do you have pets? Do you have kids? How old are your kids? How long do your kids be in there? Are you going to have adult children? Are they going to stay after the fact when they're 20, 25 years old? Are they going to have family that's going to move into your house? Like, how many people does this kitchen need to serve? Is it going to be an entertainment place? Is it going to be a food place? Is it a breakfast nook? Because I'm going to ask you so many questions about kitchens that you're going to be like, oh my God, you know about kitchens. Did I tell you I know about kitchens? No, I demonstrated I know about kitchens because I asked you so many different questions. Um, so that's a great way. Google reviews is another great way to demonstrate trust because other people, they want to hear from other people, not from you.
Yeah.
And then also just talking about the problems people have. And so this is the other thing is riches are in the niches. If you're not niched, it becomes difficult to speak about a certain type of customer. And this happens a lot. So if I'm, let's say in kitchen construction and I do kitchen renovations for folks. Um, when I say we do kitchens for everybody. You know, we have kitchens for builders, we've got kitchens for renters and investors, we've got kitchens for families, you know, small homes, apartments, estates, whatever. Well, it's difficult for me to start to understand the problems that these people have and how to solve them. Whereas if I become niche on the type of work I'm doing, so let's assume that I'm going to do kitchens for second homes or estate homes, so cottages, lake houses, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a certain vibe and different problems that people have when it comes to that. Like, well, one, I'm not going to be there all the time, so I don't want it to be just dusty. So the design of a kitchen and the way, like, you're not going to have a bunch of pots, that kind of stuff that are hanging, because over a month when you're not at a cottage, they're just going to collect dust, and then you're going to get there and dust all your pots and pans.
Yeah.
So that's what looks cool but isn't functional. So then we can start to speak to, hey, you know, you want to have the best kitchen for when you're hosting all your friends and family, but you want it to be easy to maintain. So when you're not around, you don't have to come back and clean it all up. Well, blah, blah. Like if that's your niche, you know that problem better than anybody else. If I'm reading about getting a kitchen renovation done for my second home and I see your website, I'm like, oh, you get it. You're all about people who want to host, entertain, but aren't around all the time. So by focusing in on the type of customer or the type of work that we want to do, we can speak to the problems around that type of customer, around that work better than if we're something for everybody. So that's why this whole idea of talking about ourselves and not the customer is actually linked to niching.
Yeah.
And the more niched we get, the easier it is to talk about the customer. And we look at niching in a couple of different ways I mentioned earlier. One is niche around the type of customer. So, you know, we're looking at like affluent professionals with young children, as an example. They have a whole set of problems that are different than empty nesters.
Yeah.
Both are affluent, different set of problems. Or maybe it's around the type of work we do. You know, we only do granite countertops and contemporary open kitchens. Like we're We're the ballers when it comes to contemporary style, open air, granite kitchens. I mean, that's just a random example, but like if that's what you want, I'm the person to come to. So it's the type of work, um, or the type of home. That could be another one.
Yeah.
Condos downtown, second homes, lake homes, suburban, whatever, um, tight spaces, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But figuring out what the niche is can really help with pricing power, because if you look at a kitchen renovator or a kitchen contractor, a kitchen remodeler, depending where you are in the continent, um, if both of you have 43 Google ratings or Google reviews with a 4.9 star rating, and they're both full service kitchen renovation companies or kitchen remodeling companies, what's the difference to the customer?
Yeah. I mean, nothing at that time.
So it comes down to price.
Yeah.
Price is shit. And so we want to figure out, what's the work we love doing, our team's really good at doing, we're profitable, customers are happy with, and start to narrow. Because we become the choice, not a choice, we get pricing power.
Yeah. I love how you brought the part out that basically asking questions, figuring out how they use the space, what that space is for. Because I always say a good designer is someone's going to ask a lot of questions and it designs for them, for the customer, not for themselves, for like their portfolio. Because there are a lot of people out there that design for their portfolio and really want it for themselves, really. And that you're doing a disservice to your client.
Well, and it happened with our second office. Um, and it was interesting, the difference. Like the first one was like, well, what do you try to accomplish? And then the place was amazing. The second one, you could tell they just weren't there. They're like, no, it's got to be this way, like their vision. And it's cool, but it's not what we really wanted. It just, and there was a big
Yeah.
disconnect. So to your point, I think you're dead on. Yeah.
And that does a disservice to your business too, because would you ever hire that designer again?
No, of course not. It was not
Yeah.
the best use of anybody's time.
Yeah. I mean, that it comes down to that because you want referral base.
100%.
Yeah.
Life's too
So,
short to
yeah,
burn
what's
bridges.
number four?
Number four, no goal. We're
Oh,
from Canada, so you gotta picture the referee doing no goal. So a lot of times people want brand visibility, community visibility. They want more followers. I can tell you from years of experience that as a marketing company, when people tell us that, they're lying, even though they don't know. And the way I know that is because after 4 months or 5 months of cutting a check, when the results don't come in, they stop.
mm,
And so marketing is actually meant to accomplish a business objective. More often than not, that business objective is an increase in revenue. Well, what makes an increase in revenue? Typically, it means there's an agreement that needs to be signed. So, and I'm talking more specifically around services, like
mhm.
home service businesses. So, in say kitchens, landscape, flooring, even HVAC, whatever it might be. Well, if we reverse engineer what we're going to do to get a contract signed, typically there needs to be a meeting or a presentation with a customer. Well, how do we get a presentation with a customer? Well, typically we have to have some sort of meeting with a customer before we present anything to them. Maybe there's a design or a consultation or whatever. Well, how do you get one of those? Well, usually we have to have like a phone call to qualify somebody. Okay, well, how do we get one of those? Well, either they've called in or there's a form submitted on a website. So if you really simplify, like for us, results first marketing is about getting the phone to ring or someone to submit a form on a website. So that's an inquiry or a lead. If we know our revenue model and our conversion numbers and how many leads turn into customers, and we understand our budget for the year and what our growth plans are, we should have a pretty good sense of how many new customers we need. Now, word of mouth is going to bring in X, but if our growth plans are X plus Y, I need to figure out what Y, where my lead's going to come from. Using something like a good, strong built, like well built website, the way we've talked about using, talking to the limbic brain, not neurocortex, being niched, being, problem oriented and customer centric. You layer Google ads on a website built like that, and with a Google ad strategy done properly, we can see what a cost per lead should look like. If you're in contracting and you want to get a job of $100,000, cost per lead is somewhere around $300-400. And we usually think about takes 3 leads to get a qualified lead. So you're looking at maybe $1,200 to get a good qualified lead for a $100,000 type of renovation project. Out of that, you could probably look at like maybe 4 to 1. So $1,200 gets you a good qualified lead, takes you 4 qualified leads to get a customer. That's about $5,000 to buy a customer for $100,000 project. Start thinking that way though.
Mm-hmm.
Start thinking a lot differently. You start buying customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And you just have to, that's again something if it's an entrepreneur that started the business that has never really tapped into this side of their brain that they're thinking of the business because a lot of the people in my business at least are starting the business because they loved, cabinet making or woodworking or whatever.
Yeah.
And they're in it for that passion and they're not in it. It's kind of like what you said that there's the three types of entrepreneur. And they want to take over this marketing and business side of the business, but they just can't think that way.
Yeah. Well,
And
it's going to take some time. They'll get there.
yeah, do
Or they can
you,
hire someone like us.
I was just going to say, do you suggest, do you think it'd be better to learn it and for them to do it or hire someone that is a professional in it?
Well, I mean, it depends where they're at. But going back to one of the original questions of what to do when you start, like if you're at $100,000 in revenue and your average job size is, let's say, 10K for the sake of simplicity, you need 10 projects a year to do $100,000 a year. Well, spending $5,000 to buy a customer is going to
Mm,
be a really tough pill to swallow.
yeah.
And it doesn't work on its own. It's got to be part of a bigger play. So, hiring somebody to help with lead generation or customer acquisition is probably, you know, north of $500,000 a year. A million plus a year is when you start wanting to hiring somebody, someone like us to come in and really start to make a system to generate leads. Until then, I'd say, this is where you got to build your network.
Hmm.
So you're getting, referrals coming in from other people in your trades that are like non-competitive and complementary. Yeah. So, but the thing is, once you start to build a marketing plan and you start paying for advertising and doing digital marketing properly, even if you're learning it yourself, having that goal of a cost per lead is really helpful to start with because you could be completely off. Let's say your goal is $200 cost per lead and you end up at 8.
Yeah.
Well, you're way high. Well, you do that for a year. Next year, you'd be like, okay, well, how do I get down to 6? Now you're ahead of 99.9% of the entire world because you're now measuring the result oriented goal for marketing that you want to accomplish. And so let's say you have, an $8,000 budget and you want to get, a $400 cost per lead to get you 20 good leads, which turns into say 5 projects. Well, you're already thinking about it and doing it better than everybody else because no one's thinking about it this way. I think that's people need to start orienting themselves around like a business objective when it comes to marketing. And for service businesses, it really should be about getting an inquiry.
Yo, yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah, yeah.
I love hearing this stuff. How about number 5?
No industry benchmarks. So when you're doing stuff, you don't even know if it's going well or not. In that last case where someone's say trying to get a $400 cost per lead to get 20 leads on an $8,000 budget, I mean, it's good that they're starting to measure in their own world, and that every year that goes by, they're getting tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter, and then to the point where it becomes predictable.
Yeah.
Um, However, it'd be really nice if they knew if they were doing better or worse than everybody else. Like they might be doing $400 cost per lead, thinking that life's great, but really someone down the road is doing $100 and they're doing something differently. Well, it would be really nice to know if you're above or below average when it comes to your industry. So working with someone that knows your space really well can be really helpful from that perspective. And that's something that we bring to the landscape industry. Like we can tell right away if people are doing great out of the gate or if they're behind and something's wrong. We got to figure out how to make it better. We know what an average website conversion rate should look like. We've got a good idea of what a cost per lead on different types of landscape projects should look like all across the country. So for us, it can be really helpful for our customers because we can tell them, hey, like out of 100 accounts, you're in the top 10%. Like we're not touching this thing until we see it go bad, and here's why. Or hey, you're in the bottom. Like we're working our butts off right now to get you above average because for some reason things aren't clicking yet.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing how you stack up next to everybody else is super helpful. It also gives you a lot of insight, so you don't have to waste money on stuff that doesn't work. So like we understand what key terms bring in high value jobs versus which ones don't.
Yeah. And that answers exactly one of the first questions I asked on here about hiring someone in a niche. And because you would never know that information if you're digital marketing company that does it for really any type of business. Because how do you
Yeah,
benchmark
exactly.
it?
we wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, so you're kind of you're paying for it. It still might help hiring a company like that, but you're doing yourself a disservice in your area.
Yeah, I mean, assuming that you can find somebody that's um, got a good handle on your industry, and
Yeah.
the odds of finding somebody that know your industry, I would say it's pretty high.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
But
Well,
there's a tendency for a lot of entrepreneurs to work locally, and when you start thinking locally first, the odds of finding an industry expert in your backyard, I would say, is low
yeah.
versus
Oh,
trying to find an industry expert in the USA, and then the odds of it is, I'd say, pretty high.
go up. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I love this. Is there a way someone could get more information from you? Is it your website, social media? Where do
Yeah, go to
people do?
intriguemedia.com. Um, Under resources, there's a bunch of guides, our
Oh,
talks. There's a podcast there. Um, it's all for free, and you can check us out on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, X, whatever. Intrigue Media, but intriguemedia.com, everything links out from there. But under
cool.
resources, I'd say that there's a bunch for people if they're looking for the five mistakes, or we have a podcast as well for the growth constraints holding entrepreneurs back.
Okay. What's your podcast called?
Well, for us, it's specifically landscapers, but all the
Okay.
lessons are not landscape, on their own. But it's called the I Am Landscape Growth Podcast.
Love it. Okay. Yeah, I'll
because
tag.
we've because we've niched, right? That's the idea.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll definitely put the links in the social profiles in the description of the podcast and on social media when I post this.
awesome. Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, Robert, I thank you so much for hopping on the podcast. I learned so much. Whenever you want to come back on, let me know. But I definitely think this was beneficial for really anybody in this niche or anybody outside the construction niche.
Awesome. Well, thanks for
Awesome.
listening, everybody.
Thank you very much.